We settled the Viking versus samurai debate, and the winner is shocking. Picture an arena. In one corner, history's most iconic warriors are about to clash, but only one can walk away the champion. We have the Viking, a ferocious raider from the unforgiving north, draped in mail and powered by a legendary battle rage. In the other corner, the samurai, the master of the blade from Japan, a symbol of discipline with a spirit of calm lethality. It's the ultimate clash of cultures, steel and warrior spirit. We've all argued about it. We've all picked our favourite. But what does the evidence really say when you strip away the legends? Who truly has the advantage? The answer isn't simple, and it has layers that just might surprise you. To settle this age-old argument, we have to look past their famous weapons. We need to break down their armour, their training, their mindset, and the very worlds that forged them. Now, to make this a fair fight, we're not just picking these warriors from any random point in their histories. That would be an unfair mess. A 19th century samurai would have wildly different tech than an 8th century Viking. Instead, we're setting the stage in the 11th century. This was a time when the Viking Age was at its peak, and the classic samurai warrior was becoming the legend we know today. Our arena is neutral ground. A one-on-one duel to the death. No horses, no sneak attacks. Just two champions, ready to prove who is superior. The forge of war. Armour and protection. Before anyone even throws a punch, the first line of defense is armour. This isn't just about stopping a blade, it's about mobility, psychology, and the entire philosophy of combat. And when you compare the Viking and the samurai, you see two completely different approaches to staying alive. Let's start with the Viking. The classic image is one of brutal function. The heart of his defense is a long mail shirt, a hauberk made of thousands of interlinked iron rings. This stuff was incredibly expensive and a sign of a real player on the battlefield. It offered fantastic protection against the slashing and cutting attacks common in Europe. Underneath the mail, a Viking would wear padded leather or thick wool to help absorb the blunt force from a hit that the mail alone couldn't stop. On his head, a simple helmet, maybe with a guard for the nose. But absolutely no horns, that's a myth. The most important part of his defense, though, wasn't something he wore. It was something he carried, the shield. The iconic Viking round shield was a dynamic weapon in its own right. Made of wood and faced with leather, it wasn't just a wall to hide behind. A good warrior used it to block, to parry, to punch with the central iron boss, and even to trap an opponent's weapon, creating an opening for a brutal counter. It's a tough defensive system, but all that weight was definitely a trade-off for agility. Now let's look at the samurai from the same era. The classic armour was the o-yoroi, a beautiful but deadly effective piece of craftsmanship. Unlike the Viking's simple sheet of mail, samurai armour was made of small, individual scales of iron or hardened leather, all lacquered and laced together with silk cords. This design was born from a different style of fighting. Early samurai were primarily mounted archers. Their armour had to be flexible enough to let them twist and draw a bow on horseback. It was generally lighter than a full mail suit and allowed for more movement, which was a huge plus. But that mobility came with a price. The boxy design of the o-yoroi left some pretty big gaps. The armpits, inner thighs and parts of the neck were less protected, creating weak spots a smart opponent could aim for. While later armour became more complete, the 11th century samurai was betting on mobility over total coverage. And unlike the Viking, a samurai typically didn't carry a shield, relying on his armour and his skill to keep him safe. So in this first round of pure protection, who gets the point? The samurai's armour is sophisticated and mobile, perfect for his style of fighting. But in a straight-up, face-to-face duel on foot, the edge has to go to the Viking. The combo of a full mail shirt and, crucially, that big, versatile shield creates a more complete defensive wall. That shield is a potential game-changer here, capable of shutting down many of the samurai's attacks before they even get close. The Viking takes round one. The tools of the trade. Weaponry. A warrior is defined by his weapon. It's an extension of his body, the tool that delivers his skill and strength. And right here is where we get one of the hottest points of the debate, the legendary katana versus the brutal Viking axe. Let's start with the soul of the samurai, the sword. In our 11th century duel, this would be the tachi, the ancestor of the more famous katana. It's a long, curved blade known for being incredibly sharp. The folding techniques created a blade with an edge that could do horrific damage to an unarmored target. But this is where the myth collides with physics. Against the Vikings' chainmail, the katana's greatest strength, its slicing ability, is seriously reduced. A powerful slash might break a few rings or cause some nasty bruising underneath, but it's not the armor-shredding superweapon you see in movies. Plus, the sword often wasn't even the samurai's main weapon. For a lot of their history, their go-to tools were the yumi, a long, powerful bow used from horseback, and polearms like the yari spear or the naginata, a curved blade on a long staff. These weapons gave the samurai the huge advantage of reach. Now let's head over to the Viking armory. While Vikings had their own beautifully crafted swords, their signature weapon was the axe. And for this fight, we have to talk about its most terrifying form, the Dane axe. This wasn't a little hatchet. The Dane axe was a monster of a polearm with a wide, thin blade on a shaft up to 5 feet long. Used with 2 hands, it was a weapon of pure, devastating power. It didn't need to be razor-sharp like a tachi. Its job was to smash through whatever was in front of it. Against the samurai's lighter, scale-based armor, the Dane axe is a catastrophic threat. A solid hit wouldn't just cut, it would crush, deform the armor plates, and transfer a shocking amount of energy to the body underneath. The Viking also had his spear and his own broad, double-edged sword, which, when used with his shield, was a balanced and deadly combo. The shield itself was an offensive weapon, used to bash and control the opponent. When you put these arsenals side by side in our duel, the picture gets clearer. The samurai has a fantastic, versatile toolkit, but in this specific face-to-face fight, the matchup of their most iconic weapons seems to favor the Norsemen. The tachi, for all its legend, is just not the right tool for defeating chainmail. The Dane axe, on the other hand, feels almost perfectly designed to counter the samurai's armor. For this round, focused on a close-quarters duel, the brutal power of the Viking's main weapons gives him the edge. Round 2 goes to the Viking, the mind of the warrior. Tactics and training armor and weapons are just tools. The real difference maker is the mind and body behind them. It's in the training, the discipline, and the fighting philosophy. And here, the Viking and samurai couldn't be more different. Let's start with the Viking mindset. The Norse were forged by a world of brutal survival and opportunistic raiding. Their training wasn't in some formal dojo. It happened on the deck of a longship, in a shield wall, and in countless skirmishes across Europe. This created a warrior who was, above all, a pragmatic and incredibly aggressive survivor. While they could fight in disciplined formations, their individual style was known for its overwhelming ferocity. This ferocity found its most legendary expression in the berserker. Now, how much of the berserker is fact and how much is saga-fueled myth is still debated by historians. But the stories paint a chilling picture. A warrior entering a trance-like rage, howling, biting his shield and fighting with a terrifying lack of self-preservation. The sagas claimed they were immune to fire and iron. While that's almost certainly an exaggeration, imagine the psychological effect. Facing a berserker wasn't like fighting a man, it was like fighting a force of nature. Now, let's journey to Japan. Where the Vikings' training was informal and learned through hard knocks, the samurai's was a lifelong, formal quest for perfection. Their entire life was governed by a strict code, later called Bushido, that valued discipline, honor, and a calm acceptance of death. A samurai's training, bujutsu, covered all the arts of war. From childhood, they would master swordsmanship, kenjutsu, archery, kyujutsu, and often unarmed combat, jujutsu. The samurai fighting style was a science. It wasn't about wild swings, it was about controlled, efficient movements. They were trained to read an opponent, find the tiniest opening, and exploit it with a single, perfect strike. Their mindset was strategy over brute force, using an enemy's own energy against them and keeping a calm, focused mind zanshin, even in the middle of a fight to the death. So, who wins the battle of mind and method? The Vikings' raw aggression is a powerful weapon. The shock of a berserker-style charge could break a lot of warriors. However, the samurai's entire philosophy is built around keeping your cool in the face of chaos. Their lifetime of intense, multidisciplinary training gives them a huge technical advantage. They are masters of strategy in a way the average Viking, for all his battle readiness, simply was not. The Viking is a terrifying brawler, but the samurai is a martial artist. In a contest of pure skill, the advantage has to go to the samurai. Round 3 is his. The X factor, defining the battlefield. So we're tied. The Viking has better armor and more effective close-range weapons for this particular fight. The samurai has far superior training and discipline. The winner then will be decided by the X factors, the little things that can turn the tide of any fight. Just think how different scenarios would completely change the outcome. What if they didn't start face to face? Imagine an open field with them starting 100 yards apart. The fight is over before it even starts. The early samurai was, at his core, a mounted archer. On his horse, with his powerful Yumi bow, he could just circle the slower Viking. The Viking, who fought almost entirely on foot, would be a sitting duck. His only move would be to raise his shield and hope, while the samurai peppers him with arrows until one finds a gap. In this scenario, the samurai wins easily. Now, what about a dense forest? Here, the tables are completely turned. The samurai's long bow and polearm would be clumsy and get tangled in the trees. The Viking, from the forested lands of Scandinavia, would be right at home. The close, chaotic fight would favour his brutal, up-close style. His shield would be perfect for crashing through the brush and defending against ambushes. It would be an ugly, brutal fight where the Viking's raw strength and adaptability would probably give him the edge. This brings us back to our chosen battlefield. The one-on-one duel. No horses, no bows, starting close. This is the ultimate test of armor, weapon, and skill. And it's here that the matchup gets really interesting. It forces the samurai's greatest strengths, his mobility and ranged attack, off the table. He's forced to fight the Vikings' kind of fight. The verdict. The moment of truth. The score is tied. The Viking took armor and weapons. The samurai took training and tactics. Our X factors show how easily this could go either way, but we have to make a call for our specific arena. A face-to-face duel on foot. Let's picture it. The samurai, poised, holding his tachi, eyes scanning for any weakness in the Viking's stance. The Viking stands his ground, a wall of wood and iron, his heavy Dane axe resting on his shoulder. The movies tell us what happens next. The samurai zips in with impossible speed and ends the fight with one perfect slice. But the historical reality of this matchup is likely far more brutal and, frankly, a bit shocking. The samurai's tachi is a slashing sword. As we've covered and as tests have confirmed, slashing attacks are mostly useless against a good suit of chainmail. The Viking's mail would stop the majority of the samurai's cuts. But what about the gaps, you ask? The samurai is trained to strike those weak points. This is where the Viking's shield becomes the ultimate trump card. That big round shield would cover the very openings the samurai needs to hit. While a master swordsman is adaptable, his fighting style just didn't prepare him for an opponent who uses a large shield so offensively. It's even plausible the samurai's blade could get stuck in the wooden shield, something a Viking would be trained to exploit instantly. Now the Viking moves in. He doesn't need to be precise. He doesn't need to find a tiny gap. He just needs to land one solid hit with that Dane axe. The samurai's armor, designed for flexibility, is unlikely to stand up to the focused, crushing power of that two-handed axe. A blow to the helmet could be fatal from concussive force alone. A hit to the body could crush the plates and the bones underneath. The samurai's superior skill is undeniable, but in this specific fight, it might be cancelled out by a fundamental mismatch in gear. The Vikings' combat system, heavy mail, a large shield and a devastating impact weapon, acts as a hard counter to the samurai's system. The samurai's greatest assets are speed and precision, but the Viking's defense neutralizes that speed and his offense doesn't need precision. Therefore, in our specific scenario, a face-to-face duel on foot, our analysis points to the Viking. It's a shocking conclusion, but the pragmatic, brutal, and heavily armored approach of the Norseman seems perfectly suited to take apart the elegant warrior from the East. The samurai is a master artist of combat, but the Viking is a terrifyingly effective engine of destruction. And in this arena, destruction wins. Conclusion. So in a clash of legends, the raw, crushing power of the Viking appears to overcome the precise, deadly art of the samurai, at least in this one scenario. It's a conclusion that challenges what a lot of us believe, and it proves that sometimes brute force has a terrifying quality all its own. But that's just our take based on the evidence. This debate is far from over. What do you think? Did we get it right? Could the samurai's skill still find a way to win? Let us know your verdict in the comments below, and if you like this clash of historical titans, you won't want to miss what's next. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're the first to see who steps into the arena next time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.